There's a new man in purple as GM Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah continues to make his mark in Minnesota. TJ Hawkinson goes from the 1-6 Lions to the 6-1 Vikings. Eric, are you ready for some hot takes?
I am so excited. It's been a few weeks and we have a lot to cover. So let's get right to it.
Let's get in. No intro?
I forgot it.
Yeah, the intro. We gotta have the
Yeah.
opening
All
credits here.
right, all right.
Yeah.
I'll
We
stop
got we
everything.
got
I'll
the fans
stop.
got to get their grades in, their comments in.
That's right. It's
Exactly.
my fault. I
You gotta have the
apologize.
preview.
What's your take? What's your take? Let's go a Viking on Viking Hot Takes.
Welcome to the fast moving Minnesota Vikings talk show, Viking Hot Takes. We've got 6 questions, 20 minutes, and the fans with the answers in the comments. Welcome, y'all. We're after the trade deadline today. Eric, how you feeling, man?
You gotta feel great. The Vikings are 6-1. They just traded for a tight end one, and the Irv Smith, who really wasn't having that great of a season, was down. Sounds like a high ankle sprain, but the original estimate is 8 to 10 weeks. So that seems like a really serious high ankle sprain. So, but then getting the news of the TJ Hawkinson's train right after that. I mean, it's the Vikings are going for it, and with the lead in the division that they have, you kind of have to you see why they're doing it, and it's an exciting time to to be a Vikings fan. And again, you see all these things where, well, the how they are a 6-1 team. That's fine. They're still 6-1. They're still leading the division by a whole bunch. So let's go.
Let's go. Well, let's hop into it. Eric's already spitting takes, but we're going to start the show now. I'm going to ask Eric the full question. There is only one place where we can start this show. It is with the big trade news. The Vikings trade for TJ Hawkinson. They send a second round pick and a fourth round pick to the Detroit Lions. They get back two conditional fourth round picks, one in 2024. Eric, grade this trade.
I mean, you obviously want to see how it plays out, and it could vary greatly depending on how Hawkinson performs and how the Vikings perform in a whole. But first blush, I mean, it's got to be a minus for me, just because they're getting a couple of those picks back, and of course trading a second for a fourth and rearranging that. It's not as bad as it sounds, because the second rounder that the Vikings are giving up right now is a pretty late in the second round pick. I think they're 29th or 30th or 28th or something along that in per round in the pick. And the Lions right now, I believe, are the number one overall pick. So when you're jumping to the very end of the second round, and maybe that changes, of course, in the very beginning of the fourth round, that's not a ton of trade value to give up. And especially when it was such a huge need position after Irv Smith once again went down. It's you hate to bring up a Zimmerism that you can't make the club from the tub, but man, he has had a really rough time with injuries, and just even when he was healthy this year, his performance wasn't that great. And TJ Hawkinson gives you a known commodity who should fit really well in this offense. He's got the size. His blocking is extremely underrated, and that can be a big part in this offense. They can open up other lanes. And now Kirk Cousins has a ton of weapons to go for. I mean, he has the 1-2 punch in Thielen and Jefferson that we knew about. Osborne has had some good flashes this season. You have Cook and Madison taking care of business for the most part in the backfield, especially this last week. It's a formidable offense, and let's not forget the offensive line outside of Ed Ingram, who's a rookie. Everyone has been playing pretty darn well, Garrett Bradbury included. So when you look across this offense, this is a contending type of offense. And when you have the 6-1 record, when you have the aforementioned big lead in the NFC North, I mean, it was a great week overall for the Vikings. They won, everyone else in the division lost. That's always cause for celebration. So it's really exciting. And again, it could play out a whole bunch of different ways, but first blush, they didn't have to give up a ton. They're going to get a little bit back, and if they win the playoff game, I believe the one pick they get back turns from a fourth into a fifth. But I think that's a good cost of doing business, because that means the trade was successful in the first place.
Yeah, Eric, you're making a strong case, and I can feel that passion. I know you came back from that Jared Allen halftime show hyped. I'm going to if you had asked me before this trade, should the Vikings be making that trade at the trade deadline, I would have said no. And so I'm going to give this trade a solid B. It's not a hump move for me, and that's because I just think the Vikings are far away from getting over that hump. Yes, they're 6-1. Yes, they're leading the NFC North, but you look at some of their advanced stats, you look at some of their production totals, you look at some of their third down and long, their offensive efficiency totals. They're not just quite there yet. And so we have to ask ourselves, are we drinking the Kool-Aid enough to give up a second round pick when maybe this isn't our year? Does pushing the chips in now really give us a hand that's going to make us a Super Bowl contender or even close? Now, he's a clear upgrade at tight end. I'm not going to argue that. But for me, what it comes down to is TJ Hawkinson needs to be the number 2 receiver in this offense for the trade to be worth it. Needs to see way more than 4 targets a game like Irv Smith was getting for this trade to make sense. And he needs to get more targets than Adam Thielen and KJ Osborne if this trade is going to be worth it for me.
I'm with you on the targets. He definitely has to be more involved in the offense than Irv Smith was, but on a lot of different factors. The amount of exact targets, that's if again, like I touched on, Hawkinson can block. He can do
Yes.
a really great job in the run game, which hasn't been always great this season. It's been kind of sputtering. Dalvin Cook's numbers aren't great, and I'm totally with you. There is a top tier of NFL teams right now, and it's the Eagles, the Chiefs, and the Bills. They are head and shoulders above everyone in any advanced stat. And yes, the DVOAs, the grades, and all the advanced metrics do not look good for a 6-1 team. But I think it's still a 6-1 team that can improve. Like I think there's a lot of room to improve, and Hawkinson should help them do that. So they aren't giving up it isn't the Rams F them picks kind of trade, but it is giving up some draft capital, and Hawkinson has to be a market upgrade in this offense. And again, they still have him for next year. It is the 5th-year option that the Lions already signed him to. But maybe they restructure that in some way next year if he works out. But it's a good 1.5-year rental to see what you have, and it looks like a big upgrade for the position. So my
All right.
question,
Yeah.
obviously, so my first question, it's an easy transition from there. Is Irv Smith Jr. done in Minnesota now with this trade?
It's so easy to say Irv Smith is done. He had a bad drop early on the season, couldn't connect in the first game, rough start to the year, and now another injury that puts him out 8 to 10 weeks. It's so easy to say Irv is gone. Me personally, I don't think they're going to go out of their way to get rid of Irv Smith Jr. He is under contract through 2024. And yes, they can get all the 1.3 million that he's owed back if they cut him. But I could see this 2023 team going into that year with TJ Hawkinson, Irv Smith Jr., and Johnny Munt. That's a fantastic set of tight ends that Kevin O'Connell can play with as his playmakers continue to evolve. So I'm not going to sit here and say no, he's definitely gone, because I think he's cheap, and I think you can keep him into camp next year and then make the decision to cut him there. So Irv Smith still has an opportunity to be a part of this football team. Now, I will say that if you look at TJ Hawkinson compared to Eric Smith Jr., Hawkinson is just way more of a legit receiver. Hawkinson lines up in the slot for like 44% of his snaps in Detroit. So all this attention on Irv Smith getting the down arrow here, KJ Osborne better watch out, because what they've done here is they've gotten a slot receiver. They've gotten a big 6'5", 255-pound receiver, somebody who we don't have on the team. And I think we're going to see some 2 wide receiver sets, more 2 tight end sets. And that really puts notice on me, where we say we're in 11 personnel, but our slot receiver is TJ Hawkinson. And then we've got Johnny Munt at tight end. So KJ Osborne really needs to step up and kind of take some of those targets away from Adam Thielen, because he's not competing with TJ Hawkinson if we start putting TJ in the slot more.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair. It just with the Irv Smith, yes, he probably will be cheap, but he's going to be cheap for just about anyone, because this is his last year of his contract. It is year 4 already.
Yeah.
I've made the joke like this year was the third annual Irv Smith breakout year, because we've been saying it since 2020. Like, it just seems like he's so young because he's barely been on the field. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of what you expect the price not to be too high. And yeah, with having Hawkinson in the fold and having someone else like Irv Smith, who has shown he can be a decent receiver, he's a little undersized. And again, if the health thing is cleared, that's you can just be a lot more versatile in the offense. You don't have to depend on an aging Adam Thielen and kind of an up and down KJ Osborne. You can run these 2 tight end sets. Johnny Munt, like he caught a touchdown. I loved. I
Yeah.
can't remember who did the meme, but they did the Randy Moss Photoshop of 1 catch, 1 yard, 1 touchdown. The old the Thanksgiving game against the Cowboys. I thought that was pretty great. But yeah, it's the more options, the better. I'm not going to say never, but if I had to guess right now, I do not believe that Irv Smith is on the team in 2023. It just with him being a free agent and the Vikings investing in Hockenson and having other people that they're going to have to pay next year, I just don't see it.
That's fair. Let's go to the next one. I got all the fans fired up because I'm not just straight drinking the Kool-Aid. TJ Hawkinson, we're going to the Super Bowl. Eric, what's the biggest hole in the Vikings starting roster?
Well, I hope we don't have to find out, because I really think it's mostly depth on the defensive side of the ball. Because again, the Vikings up until this week have been really, really fortunate. And when's the last time a team going into week 8? Of course, it's coming off the bye, that always helps with injuries, but they had nobody on the injury report and going into last week. They had all 53 people on the roster. Of course, they had the 2 people on IR, but I think Dalvin Tomlinson might be a big one and expose some of that lack of depth, because Tomlinson was quietly having a really good year on a defense that hasn't been great this season. I think especially on the defensive line, he was really helping a lot in the middle of that defense. So losing him, maybe it sounds like I believe KOC's quote was week to week, which is really iffy. It could be a couple weeks, it could be 1 week, it could be 0 weeks. But until we know more about that, Harrison Phillips has done a really nice job, but again, we talked about him kind of going into the season that he's not going to be out there for 60 snaps a game. You kind of have to have that rotation. So we'll have to see what other players do to step up. And I think maybe another one where I was thinking maybe they would go after in the trade is the secondary, because I think that Nuck Hopkins exposed, a mismatch that we kind of all saw coming in that slot corner. Chandon Sullivan has
Chandon
been,
Sullivan.
yeah, he's been a weak spot. He's not allowing a ton of giant plays, but it's almost every week. It's 8 catches on 10 targets for close to 80 or 90 yards. It seems to be the norm, and he's not just he's that the teams other opponents are keeping drives alive from the slot, and I think the more film that the Vikings have on that. So it's I think right now there aren't a ton of glaring holes. Well, we might get to one on a future question here, but I think right now they're okay. It's just the depth on the defense is my biggest concern. How about you?
Yeah, Chandon Sullivan allowing 65 yards per game, 215 yards in the last two games combined. So, we'll move in the next one. I think that's a great answer, Eric.
Alrighty. So we asked this question, I think last show a few weeks ago. I have to bring it up. You brought it up to me. Now I'm throwing it back at my own face here. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you trust Greg Joseph?
You are way too nice to me, Eric. You're like giving me the opportunity to dunk on you. I'm not
Yep,
going to do that.
I deserve it.
My score has not changed. 2 weeks ago, you gave him an 8 out of 10.
I did.
So you tell us, what do you give him now?
It's less than 8. It's a lot. It's lower. Recent events have lowered said grade. It was just okay. He was making everything under 50, and he missed a couple extra points. No big deal. But now it's these extra points. You can't miss this many. It's a 33-yard field goal, and again, like
Yeah.
a couple of them are blocked, and you look at it at the replay on a couple of them, and it's maybe not all his fault. Maybe there's a snap here, but they're adding up. And this is I swear, it's just it's like wearing a cursed amulet when you're a kicker and you put on that purple jersey. Something goes wrong with your innards or something. I don't know, but it's a huge concern. And again, it almost cost them the game. Again, like if the Vikings lose 2 or 3 of these games, I think he might already be out. But the fact that they keep on holding on by the skin of their teeth, that we shouldn't have had to sweat that Cardinals game. It should have been a 9-point lead after the Vikings stopped the 2-point conversion. The Vikings score. They should have gone up 9, and it should have been relatively easy sailing from that. But nope, he had to keep it a 1-score game. But with the extra point, right now I'm not giving up completely because again, the majority of the stuff has been, I don't know, it's way lower. I would have to say 3 or 4. And
a 4.
if it keeps happening, I don't see him finishing the season with the Vikings. They have to go somewhere. Again, it's all these kickers though. It's like, what are you going to replace him with? It's going to be another, that's going to be another guy that you can't 100% trust, and you hope he gets hot.
We are not done bitching about edge. Greg Joseph has not made a 50-yard field goal since week 1. He hasn't made all of his kicks in a single game since week 2. If you're at midfield with 3 seconds left before halftime, you throw the Hail Mary. You don't trot this guy out there. Let's go to the next question.
So you're not like, what? You don't even update a number. You're still okay. You're out.
He should not kick a 50-yard field goal for the rest of the year. We should do something else with the ball. Eric,
all right. What's your last one?
When was the last time the Vikings were 6-1?
Well, I think you know this question, but I think I know what you're getting at with this question. So the last 2 times the Vikings were 6-1, the last time happened to be 2009. That season was pretty memorable. That was that some other guy came in for, another person from the NFC North came and helped out the Vikings. Maybe Brett Favre, I think his name was. I'm sure he's barely making headlines lately.
We don't say that name anymore. Yeah,
no, exactly. He's a Packers. Now he's back to being a Packers legend because we don't want to claim the stuff he's been doing lately. But but that season turned out pretty well. They went 12-4, stumbled a little bit. We won't revisit the final result, but that turned out to be a pretty good overall season. The time before that wasn't as great because that was the 2003 season, and that one the Vikings finished 9-7, and it was the famous Paul Allen. Speaking of the Arizona Cardinals, it was the last game of the season, and no, I still remember exactly where I was. I believe I was ice fishing that weekend, and we left the lake to watch that game to watch him clinch.
Wow.
And I drove home 6 hours right after it from the bar because I'm like, all right, I'm out. I didn't talk to anyone. I was fishing with. So there are 2 different ways this can go, and especially with how the Vikings have been kind of skating by and being an imperfect 6-1, shall we say, and with some tougher games coming up on the schedule, you could see it kind of going both ways. I still think it would have to go pretty disastrous for this team to miss the playoffs, because 9 or 10 wins might win the NFC North, even if the Vikings
Right.
stumble and go under 500 down the stretch. So I don't think it's going to be a miss the playoffs in the last play of the season kind of thing. But getting to the 2009 levels, there's a lot they have to clean up on both sides of the ball and be a lot more consistent with. I don't think the Vikings have put together a full 60 minutes of great football yet. That at least the 60 minutes of football that they're probably capable of. And that's kind of the biggest concern, because they let these teams hang around. They have great stretches. I mean, like the Cardinals game was great because they went 5 for 5 in the red zone. They were finishing drives. They took advantage. But you can't always count on the muff punt, and you can't always count on these late turnovers and the kind of the
Right.
team shooting themselves in their own in the foot. So it's I think it's going to be somewhere in between the last 6-1 finishes. Maybe the record does end up to be 11 or 12 wins, just because the Vikings, especially if some of these other NFC North teams, they have 3 games in the division left, and if 2 or 3 of them have already kind of packed it in, maybe they sweep the division and maybe they get a few extra wins, and then all of a sudden they're at 11 or 12. But to make that deep playoff run, they're going to have to make some steps up. And I think the Vikings know that. Like they know as
Yeah.
constructed, especially. But in this NFC, you have the Eagles, and then you have a ton of question marks. I mean, who else is going to
Right.
like if just get into the tournament and see what happens?
Yeah, it's interesting. 2003 and 2009, those 2 years, you compare them to now. 2003 and 2009, we had great offenses in both of those years.
Hmm.
Top 10 offense, I think we were top 2 in 2009, top 6 in 2003. The difference between those 2 years was the defense. And the defense in 2009 was a top 10 unit. The defense in 2003 was 23rd. And you're looking at a Vikings team right now. Their defense is 14th in points scored, 28th in yards allowed. It comes down to, can the Vikings either continue this turnover streak that they're on, both on special teams and defense, or will they actually start to get better? Because if this defense starts to crumble against some of the better offenses they're about to face, that's when 2003 starts getting a little crazy. Maybe not missing the playoffs, but one and done in the playoffs. We still need to see more from this defense because, yeah, they played better, but they've played better against backup quarterbacks and not the top offenses in the league. But if we're all cheering for 2009, better than 2009, I'll say.
Yes, I love it. I love
Yeah.
it. All right. Speaking of those playoffs, as of right now, which seed do you think the Vikings will get in the NFC playoffs?
you know, I, they're the 2 seed right now. They
Hmm.
have the 11th hardest strength of schedule in the NFL. All the NFC teams have pretty, easy strength of schedules. I'm a little worried about Seattle and San Francisco passing us because they just have a very easy set of games coming up. But I can count 6 wins on this Viking schedule very easily. I can stretch to 7. So I'm going to stick with the 2 seed. I don't think they'll pass Philly for a 1 seed, but I'm going to stick to the 2 seed and just be optimistic about it. What are you thinking, Eric?
Yeah, I really think just because the teams like the Seahawks and the Niners have to play each other still. They still have,
Mhm.
they're all kind of mixed up. The NFC South is an absolute disaster. So there you go. Like if you think the Vikings can win the division, they should be able to hold on to that. So I don't know if they'll be the second best team, but I think the second seed is definitely there for the taking. All right, we went a little bit over, but we had to cover that, right?
And no, I think we did a phenomenal job. You did a phenomenal job. Dave, our producer, did great as always. The fans in the comments helping us answer those questions. Sometimes this show just isn't long enough to talk about all the great things going on in Minnesota right now. But hey, that's what next week is for. We'll be watching the game. Eric, you got a score
Like
prediction against the Commanders?
Oh, well, I mean, it has to be a one-score game, right? Like that's kind of the rule. And
Has to
and
be
yes, we had a lot to cover because the comments were talking about some Ed Ingram. We did not cover him enough apparently in this show.
We didn't even talk
But
about Ed Ingram.
I know. Well, yeah, I touched on him very briefly. I'm like everyone but Ed Ingram, and everyone's like, "Let me tell you about Ed Ingram." So, anyways, score prediction. Heineke's, it's another quote unquote backup, but I'd much rather see my fellow NDSU alum Carson Wentz in there. I think the Vikings will, they're favored by 3. I think it's going to be right around there, 3-4 point game. I'll do my official prediction in Thursday's or Friday's article on Daily Norseman. I'll go somewhere around 28-24, but the Vikings get to 28 in a weird way because of missed extra points and stuff like that and 2-point conversions. How about you?
We got to hammer one of these teams, man. And it's another game where we're not playing a real quarterback. So if the defense can do a little bit more and Greg Joseph can ace his field goal, maybe we see TJ Hawkinson emerge as that number 2 receiving threat. I like Clifford's 27-17 prediction. Let's go there.
All right. Okay, well, let's keep it rolling. 7-1 heading
Yeah.
into a very tough game the following week. Hopefully they can take care of
Yes.
business because that'd be great.
One game at a time. Dave, what you got?
Hey, everybody. Speaking of Daily Norseman, Eric, Warren Ludford wrote a great piece on
Yes.
Hockenson today, and in it he said everybody that makes the Super Bowl, all the teams that make the Super Bowl except for last year, had a top 10 tight end. So we now add that piece. Most of them were top 5. I think this was a great move today. We're going to be talking about it tomorrow on Vikings Happy Hour when the guys get together. We have the full crew, Matt, Ryan, and Miles. They're going to come in and talk. We may even have a special guest out of the Vikings beat writer scene. We'll find out. And it should be a good show. And then, of course, Saturday you get me and Darren, your 2 old bloggers, and we're going to break down that Washington Commanders game for you. And always afterwards, we have the final score in the last 2 minutes of the game. It was a great one last week. We look forward to next week. And a victory in D.C. But with that, what do we say? What do we say, guys?
Well, just to be clear, on Wednesday's show, it's Matt, Ryan, and Miles. It's not Matt Ryan, the benched Colts quarterback.
Correct. It's Matt, Ryan.
Okay.
And Miles. You are correct.
That's great. That's great. Well, yeah, let's see if they wear those all whites. Until next time, y'all. Skol Vikes.
Skol.
Skol Vikings. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell, and rate us on your favorite aggregator. And a special shout out goes to our partners, the Daily Norseman, where the best Vikings content can be found, and to Lake Monster Brewing, home of the best beer in Minnesota. Skol, everybody.